questions and get involved, and then use that Q&A to talk to our panelists as well. Then just some upcoming events. Northern now takes place the second Wednesday of every month. On February 10th, we are welcoming some NMU alumni and professors from Global Campus and Continuing Ed to talk about lifelong learning and exploring the right education at the right time for you. So we will be opening registration for that soon. So please keep an eye out on your email or check out our website as well. And also don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or reach out to us at alumni@nmu.edu. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. JD Phillips, who's going to be our moderator for this evening. And Dr. Phillips is NMU's Computer Science and Mathematics Department Head and Professor. So welcome, Dr. Phillips. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kylie. Thanks for having me. Firstly, I was just going to say that if you were into our opening dance track, you can find it yourself by Googling every Berlin dance house music from the 1980s. But you didn't come for my stale jokes. You came for the panelists. So let's just jump right in. I'll introduce our first panelist. It's my colleague and good friend from my department, Computer Science and Mathematics, Jeff Horn. Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thanks, JD. Sure, I have a bachelor's degree in computer science, which I got in 1985, and then I worked for 4 years as a consultant. But because I was interested in artificial intelligence, I decided to go to graduate school. So I went and got a master's degree in computer science, then a PhD. And my dissertation was on artificial evolution as an approach to artificial intelligence, so evolving intelligence. But since I came here at NMU in 1996, I've been also getting involved in robotics and also simulated worlds to develop artificial intelligence. So we've got now a robotics lab, the Northern Evolutionary Robotics Lab, and that's and as well, I'm also directing the an NMU computer cluster lab. So that's important because you need so much processing power these days for a lot of the AI approaches. So so those two things I wanted to mention. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Horn. That was great. Next panelist is Anna Martin, CS graduate from our department, 2020. She graduated during these pandemic times. She is now a graduate student at Minnesota Duluth in the second best city in the United States. Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. So as you just heard, I am currently pursuing my master's in computer science. My research focus is in the area of natural language processing. I will be graduating in 2022 and hope to earn a PhD after. My research areas include machine reading and knowledge-enhanced dialogue systems. My current project includes an AI machine reading system designed to be able to outline the key contributions from academic articles.
Awesome, thanks, Anna. Our third panelist, he and I go way back to a number theory class 4 or 5 years ago. He is a 2018 graduate from our department. My script here says he was a computer science graduate, which is certainly true, but I think he was a double major in computer science and math. And his name is Adam Call, and he is going to tell you a bit about himself right now.
Yes, thank you, JD. So I attended Northern from 2014 to 2018 and got a double major in mathematics and then a second major in computer science. And during that time in 2016, I actually had an internship at NASA at Goddard Space Flight Center out of Maryland, where my project was, I showed up and they said, okay, you're going to write an AI for NASA. Do you know anything about AI or the Python programming language? And I said no to both. And they go, great, you have a week to learn. So that internship was very exciting and got me onto a love of AI and machine learning as a specialty. After Northern, there wasn't at the time a master's degree that I could pursue at Northern in the field. So I went to Elmhurst University in Illinois, where I got a master's of data science with an emphasis on machine learning. My thesis for that was related to AI detecting characteristics of tumbling objects in outer space. And I have continued that thesis as the director of technology for a startup here in Marquette that was founded with 2 other alumni called Call Morris Incorporated.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. I'll explain the format just a little bit, add to what Kylie said, and then we'll jump in. So I have some questions here. The 3 panelists do not know which questions they're going to receive, so I'm going to try to spread it out. If I give you a question, panelists, that you aren't hugely keen on, you can say a small bit, and then we can pass it to another panelist. Also, I have to say I'm a little nervous. I've never used this Q&A function before. We've been teaching on Zoom for nearly a year, but in the teaching portal for Zoom, we don't use the Q&A thing. So I'm going to try to monitor it if you have questions. And Kylie is going to help me if I miss any of those. I should tell each panelist member that each incorrect answer will be met with a buzz. Battery's dead, but the buzz was really funny, and 10 points will be deducted from your score. So I'm going to start with the smiley Adam Call. Throw the very first question to you. What programming languages should students learn to work in AI?
I think the first critical one to learn, in my opinion, is any scripting language, a language that you can type and compile very quickly to get to your end result, with my personal favorite being Python. It's not as new as it was when I first learned it, but it's still incredibly popular and very powerful for the simple AIs that you can create. Once you've gotten your taste of that, though, and you want to go a bit further, I would definitely recommend any of the languages used on cloud computing services. Like Jeff mentioned, AI takes a lot of computing power, and you can start off with a decent desktop computer, but before long, you're going to want to take advantage of servers on the cloud, and their programming language is similar to Python and other scripting language, but a little different, and learning that is a good course of action.
Thanks, Adam. To our other 2 panelists, anything to add to that?
I'd agree with Adam, but I definitely would say that, not to sweat it. I mean, the most important thing is to learn how to program. And, all these languages, all the high-level programming languages are all equally powerful. But these days, yeah, I think a scripting language is a great way to start, because you can interactively develop code and testing each piece more easily. But these days, start out with any language, learn the program, and picking up a new language after that is quite fast. I'm sure most of our CS majors know that.
Yeah, I've learned and forgotten and then relearned and programmed badly in 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 different languages, so I understand. Let's take a question here and throw it to Anna. So this one I think is kind of a meaty question. Is there a difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So artificial intelligence is broadly the simulation of human intelligence, such as problem solving, classifying different things into different categories, and learning from data. And it's the simulation of that intelligence within machines. Machine learning is more of a tool or application of AI. So the guiding principle behind that is, if we just provide data to machines, they ought to be able to learn from that.
Thanks, Anna. Adam, Jeff, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Anna said, and I think it's but I think it's interesting. I think it's proven very hard to directly program intelligence to figure out, how to automate it, how to write it up in code. What is the algorithm of intelligence? So I think a lot of people doing machine learning are hoping that, if we can figure out the algorithm for learning, then we're done, and the machine can then learn intelligence itself. I mean, become more intelligent, in kind of an open-ended way. That's the dream, at least. We don't have any open-ended systems yet, but systems that just keep on learning and becoming more intelligent. I think for some people doing machine learning, for a lot of people, that's like the dream, or hope. We'll see.
Well, let no good deed go unpunished. I'm going to immediately go back to you, Jeff. This question could go to no one other than you. You, with the server that I have 5 jobs running right now called Deep Learner. So the question is, what is deep about deep learning?
Oh, I see. Yeah, deep learner is sitting right next to me, actually. So yeah, you could do deep learning in the cloud, or you could do deep learning on a graphics processing unit by yourself. You know, a nice graphics card and start installing software. Basically, deep learning is it seems like a relatively new phenomenon, but it's been going on for a while because it's basically a neural network with a lot of layers. So deep in the sense of many layers, and we're talking really 10 to 20 layers, as opposed to the traditional, 2 or 3 layers of neurons. But what this has allowed, going with multiple layers has allowed is for learning deep concepts. So that's really the most important aspect of the depth is learning deep concepts. So by deep concepts, I mean there's several layers of processing, there's several layers of conceptual understanding. So I'll give you a quick example if you don't mind. I think if I can, I'm going to try sharing screen here, and I'm going to try bringing up my example of deep learning. So I'm talking about things like image recognition. So recognizing a dog or recognizing a tree, that kind of thing takes some depth of concept. So let's see if I can bring up the examples very quickly. I always find it difficult to do all this on one screen. Here we go. So it's turned out that, to recognize, let's say, a cat, you've got to recognize that there are parts of a cat. Let's say the limbs, the tail, maybe the fur, and then you are able to basically decide that it's a cat. So I'm going to give you a quick example here. Can everybody see this? Can I get some feedback from somebody that you can see this slideshow? I've just got like 3 slides. So you yes? Okay, I got a yes there. All right, so multiple layers in the neural network. And so here's a good example of what I'm talking about. This is Wolfram Research's online deep learning system. And I gave it an image of a cat. So this is a friend's cat. This is an image that the system has never seen before. It's belongs to my wife's friends, actually. And it immediately identified, came back and said, that's a domestic cat. And here's an image of our friend, Gunter, and it identified that as a person. And then this here is an image from their garden, and it identified that as a tree. And here's a fuzzy image, a little bit blurry, also from their garden, and it said flowering plant. And here's one, it actually took a guess as to what kind of plant it is, sweet bay. I have no idea if that's sweet bay or not. I haven't been able to find anybody who can tell me if that's sweet bay. I guess I should ask our friends. But sometimes, this is, I think, an incredible example. This is a photograph I took of a really nice looking heat sink that we were about to put into one of our machines here. And I correctly identified it as a heat sink. And it's not perfect. Here's some things that it kind of got wrong. But unseen images, being able to classify them, that's what we consider the kind of conceptual understanding that seems to require depth. And it's only happened when we've added so many layers to the neural network. And we think what's happening is at intermediate layers, it's actually recognizing sort of these sub-concepts, that, well, it's hard to understand exactly what the sub-concepts are, but that altogether, and then sequentially, it's able to put together these sub-concepts to understand the whole concept and able to recognize then unseen examples and classify them correctly. So, and that's led to a revolution, like, for example, driverless cars. I would venture to say that driverless cars would not be possible without deep learning neural networks. So anyway, I should stop. I think I've gone over my limit there.
There is nothing new about driverless cars. That's what we call it when my mom drives. It's a driverless car. That whole spiel frightens me immensely. So I want to ask the 2 recent grads, are we all going to lose our jobs to AI? Why don't we start with Anna and then go to Adam?
That's a really big question, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about right now. I think that as AI continues to grow and become involved in our job markets, there will be a lot of changes. I think there will be jobs that exist in the near future that don't exist right now. And I think we will also see people working alongside artificially intelligent systems. So I'm not sure that you have to worry about your specific job being replaced immediately by a machine, but people should plan maybe to, think about what that might look like for whatever your field is. What would it look like if you are working with artificial intelligence systems? Adam has a lot to say on this topic, so.
What do you say?
Anna and I have discussed before just this concept, and in my opinion, I don't think we're all at risk of losing our jobs to deep learning, but I think enough of us are that we're going to have to just rethink our association with work as a thing that everyone does for an extended part of their lifetime, and instead look at it as something if you're lucky, you get to do. And if you're not lucky enough to work, that doesn't mean you've failed. It means you pursue something else. And it's a very challenging question that someone who knows a lot about AI is not necessarily the best to answer, but we are maybe the best to say it's a question that needs to be answered.
So I'm going to push a little bit harder. And so frequently I've heard over the course of my adult life that as certain jobs become obsolete, the people who had those jobs just have to retool. Maybe when the factory closes down, all the people who work in the factory can become computer programmers. And of course, that didn't work out so well. It's not so easy to retool when you're 45 years old and you have a mortgage and 3 kids. So what would you say to maybe people with working class jobs and the threat to those jobs of AI? What should they be looking forward to?
What I would say is if trying to think about that world of AI is the benefit of AI is that it lowers the cost of the products that it helps. Where if on the simplest form, just removing human workers, which cost a lot of money, but on a much better form, making the process more efficient, things can get cheaper. And just like the Industrial Revolution lowered the cost of clothing for the average person and manufactured goods, AI will lower the cost of advanced services. I mean, even now you can have your taxes done by an automated system. That's a service that 30 or 40 years ago, you had to have a bit more money in order to have that done. So the good news for a working class person is you're going to see your standard of living become a higher standard of living become more accessible as AI brings down the cost. I think the biggest danger is, are you going to have an income in order to afford that? And so 2 solutions, either A, do the retooling, figure out a form of a job that you can do that isn't as automatable. It's not just go higher tier, it's take the disadvantages of AI and apply yourself to those. The saying that's common is that plumbers will almost never be replaced by AI because plumbing requires so much critical thinking. And so those trade skills that are not repetitive tasks, but are quite critical, that's pretty important. The other is invest in the companies using AI. If AI is going to make big tech companies horrendously wealthy and full of profit, then try to own stock in those companies so that you can get a little bit back. And that little bit might be enough to still afford a very nice standard of living. That's a very different future we're moving into.
So I never thought I'd live to see the day that Adam's advice was buy stock, but I like it. That's a good answer. I'm very excited. I'm going to change gears just a little bit because we now have, oh, good Lord, we now have 3 questions in the Q&A. I'm very excited by this. So I'm going to ask the first one. I'm going to pick the shortest one because the font is really small and I don't want to look silly trying to read it. So the first audience generated question is from KN Iligan, and it's here it is. For a student who's still learning, what do you recommend in learning the basics of AI, machine learning, or deep learning? And I will start with Jeff.
Oh, well, I mean, it depends on where you are. I mean, if you're starting from a good foundation in computer science, like you finished a bachelor's degree in computer science, then I would, well, let's say you haven't. If you haven't, then I would say get a strong foundation in computer programming itself. as well as and including some idea, some background in the operating system, the hardware, because of the need to build entire systems when you're doing AI. And beyond that, beyond the basics of computer science, I would include also definitely make sure you include mathematics in there, especially linear algebra, if you're going into deep learning. So, I mean, it's these neural networks are basically, they're basically performing operations on matrices and vectors. Okay, you might have heard of tensors and tensor processing units that Google now manufactures. Tensors are just vectors and matrices. So that's actually having a solid background, and that can really help you to put together deep neural networks. And like I said, to get them to run, I think you have to have some knowledge of basically how to build how to put together a PC, let's say, from component parts, in terms of the overall, where to put the speed and power that you need, or as Adam was saying, buy time in the cloud to run these things. But it is, it's to get these systems working well, it requires everything: software, hardware, and to some extent the operating system, all working together. I'll let others join in there. I'm sure Adam and Anna have said, having learned quite a bit of AI, can give you some background there too, some suggestions.
Yeah, I would like to second that about having some sort of math foundation in algebra and calculus. There are a lot of just out of the box products you can use, like scikit-learn, Keras, and TensorFlow, that can really help. But understanding how these systems work at a lower level is important, just because you can't just you can't just stack elements together to create a model. You have to understand how to select your hyperparameters. So that means you have to understand how to decide how many layers to use, how deep or broad your models should be. And there are all sorts of other things you can fine tune. So it really helps to start to learn more about those fundamentals. I also, depending on what your specific interests are, once you have more of those fundamentals down, topics such as robotics, sensors, signal processing, electrical engineering can be really fascinating and can lead to a lot of interesting research projects.
And if I can just add, it's a good question. I back the math, computer science very much. They're both very important in linear algebra, especially. It was a very exciting class for me after coming back from NASA and realizing it was offered at Northern to say, oh, good, I can understand everything I pretended to know this summer really in depth now. But maybe a little biased on this, I would throw data science in there, very specifically statistics, but really that deep thinking, deep human thinking about data that you're putting into a system. There's actually a way to think about AI as not just machine learning, as that's the job, but as a 5-step job, where machine learning is the 3rd or 4th step. But before that, you have to understand the data you're using and understand how are you going to input it. And to that extent, I would advise, if you're really interested in AI, to not lose sight of other passions. When I interned at NASA, when I said, cool, there are other people here using AI and using computers, none of them were just AI experts. They were AI experts who really liked solar astronomy, or AI experts who really liked earth science, or AI experts who liked biology. So it's having that other field that you can then say, I'm really passionate about AI as well as this thing, and apply it together. You can go very far. You can also be a generalist and apply AI to many fields, but don't be afraid that if you like something, you have to give it up to pursue AI.
Okay, can I just add one little thing very quickly here, JD? Cayenne's looking for a specific place to get started right now or something like that. I might suggest the NVIDIA tutorials, and from NVIDIA.com. There's some nice machine learning tutorials at different levels there. So you can get started interactively, learning how to put together the layers, as Anna was saying, you might find it, you don't have enough knowledge or background to make much sense of what's going on, but you can actually run, you get some actual neural networks, deep learning neural networks running, and see what the inputs and outputs are, and it's free. So that's NVIDIA. I haven't invested yet in NVIDIA, but I think I'm going to take Adam's advice. In future, I'll have to disclose that I've actually put some money into it in the NVIDIA stock, but not yet.
Okay, thanks, panelists. I have to say, so I'm very excited. We now have, oh my goodness, we have 6 questions in the queue.
Yes,
And I will have to scroll down and get to the bottom 2. This is very exciting. I'm going to read them. I'm going to remind the panelists that we have 6 questions, maybe more. I have 2 that I'm holding in reserve that I do intend to ask. So I'm going to ask everybody to keep things moving along briskly. So the next question is from Raymond Tim. By the way, thanks to all of you for attending, but also for asking the questions. And I'll just say that your credit card will be charged $100 for each question answered. Raymond asks, are neural nets the only types of algorithms employed in deep learning? It seems the classification and regression trees do very similar kinds of hierarchical sorting. Can someone speak to this? And I think all 3 of the panelists nodded, so I'm a little afraid. Eeny, meeny, miny. Anna, you answer.
Yeah, so, all right. Are neural nets the only types of algorithms employed in deep learning? All of the deep learning I have done has employed neural networks. I don't know very much about this topic beyond that. So I think Dr. Horn probably, oh, Adam wants to say something.
What I'll mention is that deep learning is commonly associated with neural networks. You can do deep versions of other models, but what's worth mentioning is deep learning is not always necessary. And that was a big lesson for data science, is that a classical linear regression can oftentimes perform very close to as well as a deep learning model if the problem is phrased right. And there are many different types of decision trees, regression analysis, all kinds of fun buzzwords that I could say that mean nothing, but it's all these different models you can use before you use deep learning, and use deep learning, see what it does, but many different options to try.
Okay, thanks. So the questions keep piling in. I'm going to jump ahead then. Eric Horst asked a question that reminds me very much of an SNL skit with Will Ferrell in which he kills the weatherman. I'll read the question. It says, if an over-reliance on AI eliminates other analog systems, what happens if we suffer an electrical outage or other catastrophic failure? Should we maintain some level of analog redundancy so that Will Ferrell doesn't have to kill the weatherman? He didn't say that. I said that. And I will, I think it's Jeff's turn.
Oh, is it? I feel underqualified to answer that question because I haven't put much thought into it. Yeah, I generally myself don't like to rely on completely on software-based systems for anything. I always like to have a backup, whether it's, phone, car, airplane. Software-based systems introduce a human design risk, and that's proven to be, that's proven to be a serious problem. Lots of examples of that. So yeah, I would definitely push for that. For example, I am not ready to get into a driverless vehicle that doesn't have a steering wheel and a brake pedal. I know that the state of California has given a license to Google and a number of other, Waymo and a number of other companies to go ahead and operate driverless vehicles without any manual override system on the streets of some parts of California. But I'm not one of those humans who's ready to get into one of those now. In other words, you're totally giving yourself over to the automated system. There's no manual override, and so yeah, I don't feel comfortable there. But I don't see that's not. I mean, I see lots of people ready to do that. So I don't. That's an excellent question. Something to watch.
Okay, thanks. The questions keep piling in, so I'm going to go to the next question. This one is from Troy Morris. And Troy asks, what area are you most excited to see AI applied to? And what area are you most worried for AI to be applied to? I think we'll throw this one to Anna. I think her view.
This is a great question. So I'm going to start with my worries first. I'm worried about the use of artificial intelligence in terms of surveillance and law enforcement, particularly when you think about the fact that human bias does end up being embedded into artificial intelligence systems. I think we need to be really careful about how we use that. And artificial intelligence is also capable of learning so much about us so quickly, much more than any person or group of persons could about any individual person. And so I think we need to be careful around that issue. We need to be careful not to like further widen the gap between over and underprivileged groups. Areas that I'm most excited in are probably healthcare. There's so much data that already exists. And I think it's really exciting, the potential to create artificial intelligence systems to aid in diagnosis and recommendation of different treatment programs for specific conditions. I can't talk about this a whole lot because I'm not a doctor, but I do think that's an exciting area.
I'll exercise the chairman's prerogative and jump in and say I think that that's an excellent idea, an excellent area. Medicine is, in its current state, is spectacular, stunningly spectacular at various types of interventions. I mean, we can do brain surgery, we can transplant hearts, remarkable stuff, but maybe less so at diagnosis, and that would be a very great strength of AI. So that's a great point. I'm going to doubly exercise chairman's prerogative. We have a queue of questions, so I'm just going to cut the other two panelists off, move to the next question. This one we'll throw at Adam. It comes from Brian Miller, and it says, he asks, where do you see AI taking a strong hold in everyday life?
That's hard to answer, trying to think of a place it hasn't already. I think it's kind of remarkable how much of what we interface is assisted by an AI or driven entirely by an AI. I think one area, though, that it hasn't latched on as much yet that it's going to is AI development for AI development. Getting that recursion built in of AI creating smarter AI is the start of true general artificial intelligence. But before that, even programming is the hallmark for, oh, just go train in to be a programmer and your job will be safe. But already in the 2 years I was working on my master's degree for data science, the process of data science, especially the part of choosing what algorithm to use for a problem, was being automated. People were making programs that would scan through your data and autonomously try a bunch of different models to decide which model is best. So I think that kind of practice with programming, where as a programmer, it'll be more design-based of, I want a program to do this, and then an AI that's smart enough to figure out, oh, these are the if statements and loops I need to make this happen most of the time.
Good point.
Okay, thanks, Adam. We have, let's see, so five questions in the queue, maybe more will come in. So let's take them in their turn. Kylie reminds me that there are questions coming in the chat, and Zach Owens has a question directed toward Jeff. He asks, Jeff, how is the work you did at Cornell in genetic maybe algorithms evolved, pun intended, in the current ML frameworks?
Okay, that's a good question, Zach. Zach is a former student, by the way. I was just speaking with him. He's stayed in the field of AI. But I have to correct you. It wasn't Cornell. That was my undergraduate. My graduate work was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and that was with Dave Goldberg working on, yes, genetic algorithms. So I was just at a conference on genetic algorithms. Nowadays we call it evolutionary computation. It's a little more in vogue. But in 2017, I was there in Berlin, and it was interesting because I met a couple of guys, for a couple of people from DeepMind, which is the company that developed the deep neural networks that have gotten a lot of press lately, including the ones that learned to play Atari 2600 games very well, and then went on. They went on to beat the world Go champion, Lee Sedol, I believe it was. And then DeepMind, based in London, went on to get bought by Google, now Alphabet. And so Google's made a major investment here. And the reason why I mention this is because these two came over to our conference on evolutionary computation, the Genetic and Evolutionary Computation Conference, and they were invited, and they gave a plenary talk, and they basically asked us, and they spent the whole conference asking us as individually, basically to catch them up on the field, because they wanted a revolution, a deep conceptual revolution in evolutionary algorithms, just like they were having in neural networks. They want to know what's the next step. How can we make artificial evolution learn and develop deep structures? And that was a fascinating interaction we had with them. This is basically Google, backed by Google, because I think Google has ambitions to be the company to finally develop what Adam was talking about, which is continual lifelong learning, or open-ended learning systems that basically no longer need programmers, no longer really need human architects to, as Anna was saying, put the layers together, and they'll just learn on their own and become more and more intelligent on their own. Neural networks, deep learning neural networks, have had some indications of that they can do that someday. And I think Google's looking to evolution to do that, because if you think about it, evolution is the one system or algorithm, if you want to characterize it as an algorithm, that has actually succeeded in developing intelligence, right? So over very long time scales, of course. But anyway, the idea of open-ended evolution is something that we've been thinking about in our field for a long time. But the people from DeepMind came over and said, "Well, hey, when is that going to come along, and how can you get it?" So I think they're very interested in this idea. And so there's a big field called evolutionary neural networks, which basically, in addition to backpropagation and regression and all these different learning algorithms, is saying, well, let's use evolution, that is selection, recombination, mutation, to basically evolve neural networks, better and better neural networks. So these fields are to some extent coming together. So those are the two fields, by the way. Deep learning neural networks, I should say neural networks, and evolutionary computation, that I think are the most promising. And those are the two areas, the two algorithms, the two approaches that we're going to emphasize. I'm going to emphasize a lot in the artificial intelligence course that we're teaching this coming semester. So I haven't forgotten genetic algorithms, is the short answer, Zach.
I'm tempted to push back a little bit by probing the differences between biological mechanisms of evolution and the evolution that we're speaking of here. But I'm the chairman of this session, and I'm not allowed to ask questions. So I'm just going to plow through the questions that are piling up. And Kylie reminds me that I think Ron Snitzer asked the question in the chat. I shall read it now. With the speed of innovation, how do you stay marketable and advancing when industry is changing all around you? Maybe a superb question for the two younger people in the panel who are certainly thinking about this probably day to day. Anna, what do you think?
Yeah, so part of this, I think, goes back to those fundamentals I talked about earlier. If you make sure that you really understand the tools you're working with, and you have the fundamentals necessary to do really well at your job, then you have the foundation you need to continue to learn new technologies and new ways of doing things, so that you can also continue to grow and expand and develop along with the field that you work in.
Adam, what are your thoughts?
What I would say is I'm blanking on the exact wording of the question, but it made me think of the thing I've learned trying to work in career for 2 years. Because while I got my graduate degree, I was working in New York City, and there I got a job not as an AI programmer initially, but it quickly became that. And the key lesson was that if you're doing a job that you can basically go on autopilot to do, that you can put in a podcast or put on a video on the side and just clock through your day, and that's your whole job, you're automatable. That's very much a task then if you can just figure out the process and go through it that an AI could do. So don't turn your whole job into critical thinking. I don't know if that's exactly sustainable, but try to make sure at least 3 or 4 hours of your workday is spent on tasks that are not repetition, that they're tasks that require you to think about new approaches and solving problems and thinking smarter, not harder. And as long as you're doing that, not only are you going to keep your job security, but I think those are the kinds of things that will prepare you for a future job market where it's not just about, are you a body that can press keys for 8 hours a day, but it's, are you an active mind that can do the kind of thinking AI can't?
Okay, thanks, Adam. So I have a question here from Lyanne K. I think that Anna has addressed this. The question is about facial recognition. And so I'm just going to pass on this. And Lyanne, if Anna didn't answer it in the way that you intended the question to be asked, please repost and I will ask it. I'm going to move next to Kurt Van Warmer. When I went to, here's the question. When I went to NMU, Fortran was the computer language of the day. I learned Fortran as an undergraduate too. In 1976, a Navy officer by the name of Grace Hopper spoke at NMU. Does anyone on the panel know who Grace Hopper was and what she did? And then he says, if you don't look her up, she was a leader in the industry 75 years ago, and I am not old enough to remember that. I don't even think I want to ask the two younger ones. Jeff, you're my age. Throw you under the bus. You want to go for this one?
Well, I'm no expert on Grace Hopper, but I do recall, yes, that she was a pioneer and a leader and made a lot of contributions. The only one I remember most that comes first to mind is the development of that one programming language, which I believe was Ada, the Ada programming language, which has been, it's actually a beautiful and well-designed language, but it's only one of course, many, many popular languages out there. So, and I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it was Ada that she developed. So I'd like to ask, who asked that question? If they agree with me that it was the Ada programming language, whose committee it's famous as a language that was developed by a committee, but she was, I think, the head of that committee.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jeff.
There are many other contributions she made, by the way, and I just don't remember them offhand. I would, at this point at my age, I would go to Wikipedia if I had time and answer that.
So I am going to ask two of my own questions, but I'll ask a couple more here. We may get through them all. The next question comes from someone with the exotic name of Fred Joyle. Some of the locals might remember Fred. And before I ask this question, Fred, I'm asking you to inform your wife that I'm not playing hooky from my conflicting Zoom assignment tonight. I'm hosting this panel, so please tell her I wasn't playing hooky from my other assignment. Fred's question is, what responsibility do engineers, technicians working in AI have to raise the ethical issues of their work? And I'm going to direct this specifically to Anna.
Hi, thanks for your question, Fred. My opinion is that software engineers and other tech professionals have a huge amount of responsibility for considering the ethics of their work. Not everyone might agree with me 100% on that, but I think it's really important. I think it's really important also to, if you are creating a technological product, to educate the public on how exactly it works. And what the intended consequences are. Unintended consequences is a whole other ethical area that has to be considered. And if the people creating these products and doing this research are not considering the unintended consequences, then who will? So the people that have the best understanding of this work should be the first ones to explore these issues. So I could go more into what those issues look like if you like, but I know we're running short on time.
Let's hold that in abeyance and say that'll be the first topic that we'll return to if we motor through some of the others. Thanks, Anna. That was great. I want to direct a question now to Jeff. We've talked about the deep learning revolution in some areas. How will it impact education, computer science, undergraduates, graduate students?
That's a good question. Well, I think it will particularly affect graduate students. I mean, undergraduate, the computer science curriculum, according to the ACM guidelines, which we follow, is really packed full of learning the foundations of computer science. And so, you know, for example, there's no artificial intelligence course required in that curriculum. But I would say that even at the undergraduate level, I would recommend if people are interested in, especially deep learning approach to AI, that they take whatever part of their curriculum where they have some flexibility, like for example, a senior project, class project, some electives, and use those to focus on deep learning projects, and take that linear algebra course seriously, and statistics courses, et cetera. At the graduate level, though, I think is where you can really dig into the deep learning. I mean, so I would recommend graduate programs, and I think that's what's going to happen with our master's program, which is just starting up. Well, in the fall, we'll be having new students come in, and I think there's going to be a pretty heavy emphasis, at least in the courses I'm going to offer, on artificial intelligence in general, evolutionary approaches, and neural networks, because I think that when you're doing a master's thesis, and I think Anna can speak to this, and she's I don't know, actually I don't know where you are, Anna, on your thesis, but at the graduate level you have a lot more flexibility. You're taking fewer courses, you're specializing those courses into a part of computer science that you want to pursue, and you've got, of course, your thesis or master's project. And there I think you can really dig into the deeper parts, and these really are, I know we keep saying, we're overusing the word deep, but I'm talking about deep concepts here in terms of the cognitive, mathematical, and computer science. You know, I mean, they're complex systems, really complex systems that are highly dependent on extremely parallel hardware, and the way things are processed and the way things are communicated between the layers. So it's you know, I think there's a level of sophistication there, I think, that requires graduate level, well, maybe doesn't require, but really takes advantage of graduate level focus. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Jeff. I need to make a correction. We have a second question from a person who was misnamed the first time around. This person is Bob Snitzer. It was typed in as Bon Snitzer. Apparently someone was thinking of the first lead singer of AC/DC, Bon Scott. Bob, we're sorry about that. Your second question is, do you think data security will negatively affect the spread of AI? Let's throw this one to Adam.
That's a really interesting question, actually. I'm thinking he's talking about securing our own personal data, of not allowing these large data sets to be used for AI training. Just to answer in case the other way, if people are not secure in keeping their AI algorithm secret, I think that will expand the rate of AI development, because everyone will just keep stealing the best ideas of everyone else, and that will go its own route. But as we secure our own personal data, I think that will slow down algorithms for sure, of they're being trained on these massive data sets. And when you have less data, you have less to work with. I think there are many smart ways to get around people trying to hide their personal data to get the data you actually care about. If you've been on websites that have a CAPTCHA where they're trying to make sure you yourself are not an algorithm, and they ask you identify the stop signs in these pictures, they're building a data set for a self-driving car. That's what that's for, is you're being used in proving your identity to train a data set. But I think it's really interesting, the work being done in unsupervised learning right now. Having a data set that you know the right answers to is called supervised learning. But if you don't have a data set, you can still perform AI on a more kind of results approach called unsupervised. And we're finding in a lot of ways that's a better result. If you take a data set of for example, all the YouTube videos you watch for the last year, and you train an AI to recommend you more videos. That AI is going to be really good at recommending you the videos you've already watched or very close to what you've already watched, but not good at letting you discover something new. As we cut away from that personal data being shared constantly, we will hopefully get AIs that maybe are a bit better at introducing new ideas, but still new ideas that you enjoy. So somewhere between a hard echo chamber and getting shared things that upset you, somewhere where we kind of get to see more points of view is a hopeful outcome of securing personal data.
JD, can I add something to what Adam said? Because that's excellent points. I just want to say, if you want to slow down Facebook, who's one of the big tech companies who's really going for, I think, and this is my personal opinion and speculation, going for a breakthrough in a truly human level artificial intelligence. If you really want to slow them down, I would say turn off face recognition in Facebook, because I think from what I've been reading, they're using that face recognition, which is basically allowing Facebook's AI to go around and tag pictures of you all over the internet and then ask you and your friends, is this really you? Is just adding tons and tons of positive examples to their neural network, deep learning neural network training set on you, and learning to become, to really identify you and from all different angles and all different lighting conditions and all different contexts, and in videos as well as photographs. So, and Facebook, I think, has probably, it's got to have the biggest set of examples, training examples for human face recognition of all the big tech companies, because of its, what does it have? Like something like between 1 and 2 billion accounts now, I believe. And how many of those have, now luckily Facebook has said that they are now, as of about a year ago, not automatically enabling face recognition. So they will ask you before they turn it on. But I wonder how many people say yes. And that number, that percentage, I cannot find anywhere. I've been digging and digging for that. I haven't been able to find out, and Facebook won't tell me, but that's not a surprise. So, but that's the kind of thing to think about is CAPTCHAs that Adam mentioned. That's an excellent example. And but how do you avoid CAPTCHAs? Maybe ask for a different CAPTCHA, ask for an audio CAPTCHA. How do we know that's not being used to train a deep learning neural network either? So I think it is somewhat insidious. And no matter what our security and privacy concerns, we're not going to be able to stop the development or use of our personal data for training future AIs, but I think we can slow it down. Do we want to? That's another issue.
Jeff, all those smart people at Facebook, and my Facebook feed consists of notes that my brother's ex-girlfriend from 25 years ago bought a new pair of shoes. What's going on? I don't answer that. That was a joke. I'm sticking to the schedule here. So here's a private message to Kaylee in front of 67 of my closest friends. Or Kylie, if we're supposed to end at 8, send me a bat signal. And while she's sending me the signal, I'm going to turn then to Daniel Atkinson's question. Let me read it here, and then we'll figure out who we'll direct it to. In the future, do you think AI could become a useful tool for government to analyze policy? I actually have that one, and I'll just say it couldn't possibly be worse than the humans are doing. And what do you think the implications of this might be? But I see Adam is extremely excited, so I'm going to let him try to improve upon my answer. I doubt he will.
I didn't think I'd actually get to give this answer today, but it's a very interesting topic. What you mentioned of, can we do better than the baseline we have? It touches on something very interesting in AI, and this is just good advice for people going into the field of AI has to be not just better than humans, but far better, because humans really don't like to give up freedom. Jeff, earlier you were talking about self-driving cars without a steering wheel. I can give you an example of a self-driving vehicle without a steering wheel that you've probably gotten into. It's an airplane. And you can argue, oh, an airplane is controlled by a human. Not so much anymore. Most of them are flown automatically, but it's that loss of personal control that humans really don't like. We like to have control of a car, even if driving is far more dangerous than flying ever will be. When it comes to government, there's something really exciting there of, if the standard is so high, can we create an algorithm that is much better than the human baseline? And that leads to the next important question, which is, what is better? And this is the data science part of me speaking. One of those other stages of the 5 steps of AI is not just make a system that's smart, but make a system that's smart in the way you want it to be and quantify what is good. So the final thought that I'll give back to the audience, and they can figure out their own answer, is if we develop an AI and we find a way to measure good governance, would you ever elect an AI to represent you? An AI that was designed maybe open sourced or closed source, but to represent your county or your state at the federal government and vote on bills based on its understanding of your conditions. Would you ever go for that? I think it's a question we might actually have to answer soon in the future.
Wow.
The joke potential there is just too epic, but we're running short on time. I see Jeff is dying to make a comment. Jeff, I'm just going to point to the clock and say I'm going to ask 1 or 2 more questions. You can send me your jokes privately. So I think that it might be a little bit difficult to get all of the questions in the time remaining. So I'm going to randomly pick a couple. And the way that my randomness works is that I'm going to pick the ones that are shortest. So Doug Miller asks, what's the biggest limitation to AI? What can't it do? Why can't it learn to eliminate the biases that Anna mentioned that humans program into it? So that's a nifty question. And since he mentions Anna, let's throw it to her.
Yeah, so I actually, I think that a system could learn to recognize biases. Sorry, my cat. Biases that are end up entrenched in these systems. I actually just a few months ago read a paper about using word embeddings, which is a tool used in natural language processing to detect whether or not there is bias in a training data set. These biases exist right now, but that this is a problem that I think can be solved. That was the second half of your question. Sorry, the first, what is the biggest limitation? I would say social and emotional areas are probably one of the biggest limitations. That being said, there's also a lot of research in my field of natural language processing around how do we simulate emotion, and how do we process human emotion with machines, and how do we simulate empathy.
Thanks, Anna. I'm going to bundle 2 questions into one here. So I'm going to I won't read them all, so I'm going to kind of stammer over them both. But this pair of questions is more or less directed to Anna and Adam as current and very recent graduate students. With the new master's program launching at NMU this fall, can you talk about your graduate programs and its importance in the field? And then kind of a related question from Jan Wierschke. Having been in managed care for over 15 years and a nurse for many more, the understanding of AI and machine learning is essential. So what types of education would you recommend being integrated into clinical undergraduate degrees, such as nursing or related fields? So I realize, you two, that that's a very large question, but in 3 seconds or less, no. So let's throw it to Adam and then Anna.
I'll answer the question about the usefulness of the education. From my experience, I feel like I was putting together AI with the knowledge that I got from an undergraduate, but I didn't start building AI until I finished the graduate degree. There's a lot of intricacy and knowledge in how you do the work to avoid errors that don't appear like errors. The biases that have been mentioned, those are so easy to bring about, and the way you get rid of them is much harder than the way you add them. So that graduate program, I think, really helped me. And it was a data science first and then AI second. Getting to take an AI course, I think, would go a long way towards helping you understand AI and helping you push that boundary. And if I had had the opportunity at Northern, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. And if you want to answer the question about the second half of that.
Yeah, so this is called human computer interaction. That's the name of the field that that Jan is asking about. So yeah, what type of education would you recommend being integrated into clinical undergraduate degrees such as nursing? So I'm not totally sure what that curriculum would look like, but definitely it would probably depend on like what people are using in these fields already and what those technologies look like. So I mean, I think most people in school right now are computer literate, and that will go a long way. Yeah, so I'm honestly not totally sure. I would have to do some research in that.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna and all the panelists. I'm going to point out that we are beyond the bewitching hour now. So I would like to genuinely thank all of the panelists, Kylie and her staff for hosting this, and all 63 of you who've remained, and even the ones who already bowed out by now. Thanks very much for joining us. Kylie may have a couple of closing words because her face has now appeared. Before she speaks, I would like to make one statement, leave you with a question from all four of us, the three panelists and me. So frequently you see in dystopian movies and novels an intense fear of AI taking over the world and ruling things. As our very good friend and departmental colleague, John Sarkala, likes to ask almost daily, how do you know it already hasn't? Kylie?
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thanks, JD, and thanks to all of our panelists. That was amazing. And we had some great audience interactions too. Apologies that we didn't get to all of your questions. If there are any burning questions that you would like to share with our panelists, just email us at alumni@nmu.edu and we can get you some answers too. But love to see all of our alumni out there. This was really great. If you want some more information too on the graduate program that was mentioned, for computer science, you can go to nmu.edu/graduate studies or email gradadmissions@nmu.edu if you'd like some more information on that as well. A reminder to keep an eye out for our next Northern Now, second Wednesday of every month. And also, I will be sending an email to all of you tomorrow with a brief survey for you to let us know how this went, and also some suggestions on any future topics that you'd like to see happen from Northern Now. And then also we'll be picking one winner from tonight's attendees to receive a really awesome alumni t-shirt. So another reason to keep an eye on your email. But also just follow us on social media. We're doing these digital events to help keep you connected to NMU and learn some of the great things that are going on campus and then also with our alumni. So just stay connected with us. We love to hear from you and I appreciate you all joining us. Thank you.